Welcome to FO Talks. With us today is Dr. Bobby Smith. He is an award-winning author, social scientist, and an associate professor in the Department of African American Studies. Today, we're going to discuss some recent cases of Black people found killed in the U.S. that have been receiving calls for further investigation. So, welcome, Dr. Smith. Would
Thank
you like
you.
to introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, no, I'm happy. Thank you. The introduction was great. Again, Bobby J. Smith II, an associate professor of African American Studies, and I'm just excited to be a part of raising awareness about this kind of moment in our nation's history.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that you're willing to be with us here today and offer some perspective. So I'll just get started. Our discussion today is about this growing list of cases of Black people killed um, under investigated or just blatantly violent or even blatantly racist circumstances. A lot of these killings have been happened particularly in the South, or a lot of these deaths. Um, can you give us an overview of some of the recent cases that follow this pattern that are really sort of making this call happen so loudly right now?
Well, I mean, historically, there's always been a call to action around young Black people being
Yeah.
murdered or killed in under different conditions. So I'm from the South, born and raised in the American South. So Um, I come from generations of Black people from the South, rural South, and also the urban South. So I don't have any direct connections to the kind of historical or contemporary, murders that we're seeing. But what I will say is that at least since Emmett Till's murder in 1955 in Mississippi, there's always been this kind of attention to Black people being killed, in particular young Black people being killed in a particular way. But also there's a history of under investigating or allowing people to get away with doing it because there's an assumption that Black people are disposable. There's an assumption that Black people are inferior, therefore they don't matter. Therefore, because it don't matter, then what is the purpose of even further investigating? So, at least since the murder of Emmett Till in 1955 in Mississippi, there's been this long history of this conversation around young Black people being killed under different kinds of conditions and the lack of public outcry. Now, to be sure, Black communities have always exercise their right to publicly outcry about these murders, but it's Black people caring about Black people, which nation doesn't care anything about or has not cared about, at least historically. So therefore, there's been a long history of this, but the public has not really been concerned about it as much as Black communities have always been concerned about Black people being killed in their communities.
Right, yeah. And I'm really glad that you brought up the case of Emmett Till. I think that that's definitely one of the most talked about. And it's also, I think, a really good example of what you're talking about with the disposability and the excuses of the deaths of these people. I think, with Emmett Till, you see the justification of, allegations of sexual
Mhm.
assault or harassment or whatever. And I think people lose sight of this idea. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had someone say something strange to me in a store. Never does it lead to any type of violence or
Mhm.
anything regards related to murder. So there's, and in these cases, I think we see this constant, well, what did they do? And it's usually completely,
Right. Because what's happening is that, like, and not to cut you off, but I'm like agreeing with you in that it's like they automatically become the perpetrator. They're
yeah,
no longer seen like there's no way for Black people to be considered the
the
victim.
victim. Yeah,
There would have to be a reason why they were treated a certain kind of way. He deserved to be lynched.
right.
She deserved to be shot. She deserved to do this. And no one deserves to die.
Yeah,
There's the process of dehumanization that actually undergirds this whole conversation we're having is that because you don't deem Black people as human, then you can exert human domination over them. So then Black people become animalistic in a sense. So we're moving into a conversation that, to your point, is that it's different experiences for different demographics. And what happens is that usually when black people are killed, the first question is, what did they do to get killed?
Right.
What does anybody have to do to get killed in particular context?
Yeah.
What did Emmett Till do that deserved to be annihilated like that, to
Yes.
hang like that? What what did he do?
Yeah.
And but again, the first question comes up is, what did they do wrong? Why were they in the neighborhood? Why were they out late at night? But these also young people. We don't
Yeah.
allow young black people to enjoy the joy of being young, to make a
Yes.
mistake, to then
Yes.
be then to allow themselves to then pay their debt to society in some way and then grow up to become productive citizens. We
Yeah.
automatically put them into a different kind of category and we make it follow them. So then when they are murdered, it's like, oh well, this was going to be the result anyway. They
Right.
were they were living just to end up just like this, and it's all their fault.
Yeah. I think you make a really good point about the, especially young people, not being allowed to have fun and make regular mistakes. I mean,
Hmm.
I know most people have stories of doing stupid and many of slightly
Hmm.
illegal stuff in their teen years. And there's this, I think, adultification
Yes.
of black teens and kids when they do it. So I wanted to get your thoughts on kind of the media and social media coverage and how you feel like
Mhm.
that may contribute, or if some people are mitigating that at all.
Yeah, I think I will say so. I keep going back to Emmett Till because I think Emmett Till provides like a good starting point. By no means was Emmett Till the first young black boy or young black girl or young black person to be lynched because of racism in the U.S. So I'm not using Emmett Till as the beginning of this phenomenon that we're seeing. What I
Right.
am saying is that Emmett Till's mother made a decision to make sure the media knew what happened to her son. Maybe Till Mobley practiced so much agency and agency and agency and autonomy in actually ensuring that the nation knew what happened to her boy,
Yeah.
in that she knew the power of the media. And when she decided to exercise that agency and that autonomy in showing his body to the world, it gave the civil rights movement the push it needed. The movement was already going on, but it was able to attract and recruit a group of folks that who otherwise were not necessarily doing any work in the movement. So the
That
media has a responsibility, if you will, in actually um, being a catalyst for movement building.
Right. In the case of Emmett Till, do you think that it mobilized members of the black community that weren't previously acting, or did it humanize him in the eyes of white people, and did they get involved? Do you know what type of.
Um, I would say that it definitely recruited more black people to the movement, and it did humanize him for white people to. Well, it humanized him in general,
Yeah.
because regardless, the nation he needed to be humanized because he was a young boy and he deserved to be alive. Emmett Till should be alive right now. There
Right.
should be no
Yeah.
reason why he should not be,
He would be in his
around.
60s or 70s, right?
Right. So it's not far fetched, to think about Emmett Till being 70s or even early 80s. And I think what's important here is that there were white people who joined the movement, but it did not humanize him in the eyes of those who are in power. And that's the problem. Because those who are in power create these policies or allow the law to work for certain demographics. So what it did was it showed a number of black folks in the North in particular, oh, that this movement deserves everybody's attention. And while we already have movement in the North, we're working on certain things, we got to also go to the South because they are taking out people left and right in the South. And that's what we need to exercise our movement at, or provide our resources to.
Right. So, on the topic of the law, and it not doing as much for the people in power, I think the law and the government comes in pretty heavily here. The complaint with a lot of these cases that we're talking about right now is that it was ruled suicide too quickly or not fully investigated. Like with George Jackson, he reported criminal activity and then went missing that night, supposedly leaving everything with his friends, and it was ruled a suicide very quickly, and his family is very unsatisfied. Just wanted to give an overview for our viewers. So, what would proper investigation and reaction look like in your mind? The type that might
Mhm.
actually give families some peace.
Proper investigation is proper protocol. Do the same
Following
investigation as the way you
everything.
do for everybody else. There's
Right.
already a protocol for investigation. So see the protocol through. What happened to due process? What happened to make sure that we're going to investigate every part of this? Because ruling out suicide takes a little while to get to. It can't happen in 4 hours. And in some of
Yeah.
these places where you have limited police resources in rural towns, how are they able to do these investigations so quickly without the proper resources to do them? So proper investigation is just doing proper protocol, investigating all the evidence, interviewing all actors, all the people who were involved. Everyone needs to be talked to, and then you analyze the material, and then you make your decision.
Right.
But they
Yeah.
don't. But in certain cases, like the one you named there, that's not a part of what they do. Is
Yeah.
that, well, obviously it has to be a suicide, but even if a letter was left there, even that's called into question in proper investigations. But there's a rush to, because it's somebody black, it appears that there's no care
Right.
into finding out what happened. Versus if it was a white young boy, it wouldn't be ruled a suicide so quickly because it would be a
Yeah.
proper investigation. And even if it is ruled suicide, how about we get to that point and not assume that so early on in the protocol of investigating?
Right. Yeah. And I know that I want to correct myself just in case I misstated it earlier. I know it was a preliminary, that was their preliminary decision, but it hasn't been changed since.
Hmm.
And on the topic of that care and the investigation, I agree. There's protocols and there's a way to do things. But I think that so often discretion comes in that, racial prejudices just find their way in. And I think a good example of that is the woman Tamala Horsford, who was found dead after attending a slumber party with a group of friends. And again, her death was very quickly ruled just, she fell off the balcony, she was intoxicated and whatnot. But to my knowledge, there were certain steps that weren't taken to investigate foul play and, collect evidence like a rape kit and fingernails at the scene. Um, and so, what does it feel like to watch examples of that, to watch that care not be properly taken, and to feel like the assumption is always kind of just there is no victimhood there?
Yeah, so I'll comment first on the racial prejudice part. I don't think that racial prejudices seep in. I don't think they sneak in. I think they're woven into the fabric of communities and contexts. I'm a social scientist, sociologist by training. So for me, these prejudices are already woven into the fabric of these conversations. So there's no like seeping in.
Appreciate
They're
that.
there. Saying all that to say is that I think that as a black man in America who remembers when the Black Lives Matter movement started and was active in the Black Lives Matter movement for a number of years, I remember at some point I had to stop watching the recordings of people being killed
Right.
because it began to impact me. It gave me a very visceral feeling. I felt it. And for me, I stopped watching those because I knew what it was doing to my mental health, essentially.
Yeah.
Because at some point you realize this could be any black person in America. And I
Yeah.
remember so many articles came out by elite black people who were like, now I have to teach my sons because we live in these communities that we thought were going to protect our children, but they're not. So when I see these kinds of things happen, it still saddens me. But it also reminds me how far we have to go. But what bothers me the most is that at what point are the powers that be going to listen to people, regardless of their color? Because these it's young people. We should care about young people.
Yeah.
And again, as I said earlier in our conversation, is that young white children are allowed to run free. They're allowed to just be and make mistakes and drive crazy and then get off because people in power know people or they're connected, their families are connected to people. But when black children want to have fun, it has to be policed. When black children want to go out and just be joyful, it has to be something that is surveilled. And so when I see these things happening in the media, all these things are running through my head. Also think about my family members and the safety of them as well. But also, some as a professor of African American studies, I also understand social responsibility. So at some point, how am I going to contribute to the liberation of black people from these problems?
Right. Yeah. That's a complex series of questions. And you mentioned how at some point you did have to stop, immersing yourself so heavily and seeing the violence on social media. And I wondered if you could kind of give your thoughts on how to handle that, I guess, decision of how much emotional responsibility to take on, how much emotional labor to do, in regards to those types of things. And also, I guess, how you feel about the responsibilities of other communities to take on some of that labor.
I don't think anybody. I don't think we should have access to it. I don't.
Interesting.
I don't. I mean. I don't. I mean. I think that we as a broader public should. Now, I do think it should be body cam should happen
Right.
because as a part of a proper investigation, that becomes evidence. So the reason why we're seeing it so much now is because so much evidence has been buried in the past when it
Right.
comes to these murders. So now we take it upon ourselves to record it because if we don't record it, then you'll say it didn't happen.
Yeah.
No, I did not beat them down. No, I did not lynch them. Oh, actually, you did. So there's recordings here, but those of us who are consumers of social media, I don't necessarily think that we should be. I'll say this: I don't think we should have access to it, but just because we have access to it doesn't mean we have to watch it. Because I
Right.
don't think it's evoking the same kind the same kind of emotions as the Emmett Till thing did. Because media's changed. Because now we
Yeah.
see it all the time. When Emmett Till's body appeared in Jet magazine, or yeah, I think it's Jet or Ebony magazine. When his body appeared, or when the open casket happened, you saw it, and then you didn't see that anymore. Now
Right.
you go on X or you go on Instagram or something, and you just go through your feed, and if you and if the algorithm is working that way, then you keep seeing
Yeah.
police stops, people being all kinds of stuff, and at some point it becomes a regular phenomenon for you. So a black
Yeah.
boy, black girl, a black trans person, a black non-binary person, it doesn't even matter
Yeah.
because you see it so much. So we become desensitized to it.
That is a really good point. I totally agree with you. That's so interesting. I really never had internet access, so this is my first couple years of internet access, and I've never realized how graphic and available these things
Hmm.
are, and it's got me thinking. The desensitization I think makes it more difficult to process, and I think you
Yep.
made a really good point about how Emmett Till, you saw it, you sat with it. That was a huge event in your life, and
Hmm.
now we're seeing these things just and then
Literally,
yeah,
it's like the TikTok stuff. It's like you just go through it, like it becomes entertainment. And Black death should not be entertainment.
yeah,
Young black folks being murdered under mysterious conditions and circumstances should not be entertainment, but it is now. And then,
you're right.
but even the footage is being called into question because it's like, oh, it's midnight. Why were they there for midnight? Why were they there? And again, it's like we're not asking the murderers why they're murdering, like
Yeah,
why they're killing. Should I say not murder, but killing people?
yeah,
So I think there's like again, it's like when it comes to black people, there's a rush to to the adultification part. So it's like you should have known better. You shouldn't have been here. You shouldn't have done this. Versus, of course, they can be at a lake. Of course, they can be at a park. They can be walking around campus at
yeah,
midnight, and that should be fine. But then it becomes a why. It's almost like young black people are being portrayed as participants in their own death. In
Yeah.
this context, in this context we're talking about right now, in this
Yeah,
context,
I know. I get what you mean.
and that's the kind of problems we're seeing, and there are people actively working against that. But we also need policies and things that take care of those kinds of things.
Yeah, so what kind of policies do you think would be the most effective? Because I think when we're talking about things like this, I I, I do believe a lot of it comes from um the amount of discretion, I think, that's in the legal system, that's in the policing system, when it comes to investigations, when it comes to, how to handle police stops and things
Right.
like that. So, how do we legislate better discretion?
Well, I think first, Lucy, I think it's even beyond the legislation part, because obviously we're in a different socio-political climate now. So legislation, I won't even touch.
Yeah, might be tough
I
right
won't.
now.
Yeah, I won't even go that
Yeah.
route. Micro level is that we need people to stick to their protocols for doing investigations. So my solution is to rethink and reimagine how we do investigations,
Okay.
um, and how we even enter investigations, because every case is different. But you're assuming sometimes because it's a young black person and they've been lynched, which happened before, or they've been found somewhere has happened before, you're entering into the investigation already thinking something about this case because they're black.
Right.
Um, and I know there's been calls for like more sensitivity training. I'm not even calling for that. I'm calling for us to just do it by the book like you do for everybody else.
Right. So
Young
more
black folks,
uniformity almost.
yes, practice what is already there. Like the uniformity should already exist.
Right.
Like in institutions, we have protocols. In businesses, we have protocols that we have to follow. So how about you follow those protocols? Even where like institutions, like as a student, if you want to get something done at your university or college, you have to follow protocol. You can't just email the president. You just can't email the provost. You have to start at the office in which you have your grievance with, and then go to the next
Right.
step. And if it makes it all the way up to the provost or the president, then it's gone through all of these steps. When it comes to some of these investigations we're seeing now, they're skipping steps. So can we stop skipping steps? Because preliminary findings end up being the findings. You mentioned that case
Right.
earlier,
Yeah.
is that a preliminary finding should happen this week, and 5 weeks from now we should have something
New
final. Why
information.
are we 5 years later still with a
Right.
preliminary? This person's in the
Yeah.
ground now, decomposing,
Yeah.
and we are still saying it's a preliminary
And
finding.
looking for answers. Yeah.
So just do it by the book. You do everything else by the book.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk about that pain of the not knowing too. I think that
Yes.
uncertainty. I was talking to actually an Iranian psychologist a couple weeks back about like Iranian trauma and pain, and she was talking about the how the pain of not knowing is sometimes even worse than the pain
Yeah.
of reality.
Because there's no resolution. I mean, and grief comes in waves, and grief is a process. So it comes down to a point where people want a resolution. It
Right.
won't take away the sadness. It won't take away that it happened, but it will give you some level of peace because justice has been done, and now you can actually rest in that
Right.
you know what happened, and that's why they do cause of death. That people want to know how people go. But now you have these, in the right way because they follow the protocol. But
Yeah.
we're seeing in recent cases, the legal system is now, working with the, coroners and people like that because, and investigators, like they're all a part of a system in a web. And I'm not here talking about whether they work or they don't work. It's broken. That's not my concern. My concern is that you have a protocol in place and you are giving white demographics all kinds of peace, all kinds of resolutions. They know why their children died. They know how it happened. And if it was at the hands of a black person, they for sure know that. However, when it comes to us, it is at the hands of a white person killed a black person, there's a problem there. But when black people kill white people, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because again, there's this narrative around who black people are. And instead of getting to know black people and study them properly and understand black people, there's an assumption that it's not equal.
Yeah.
So my thing is that, to your point, I don't think it's more uniformity. I think just do the protocol and see it through to the end, the same way you see it through for other investigations for people who are not black.
Right. So it's about actually finishing and going further rather than
I'll put it
sticking
this way:
with
if you watch Law and Order, you watch Criminal Minds, you watch any of these shows, they
yeah,
start with a profile or whatever happened, and there's not an episode of those shows that we do not see the resolve. Now, obviously, it's
true.
gonna take longer than an hour, so I am not saying, oh, 1 hour we're gonna solve the case. What I am saying is that what we do learn from these shows is that they understand protocol and
Yeah.
they see it through.
And I think that, I think that there's definitely something to be said for lack of proper investigation and protocol in the law in many cases. I think even in, in domestic violence cases and stalking
Yes,
cases.
yes, yes.
So I definitely think that a lot of people would, I think, maybe feel that the law is not always trustworthy to finish out investigations. Um,
Also, I would say like not the law, but legal, the
the
actors.
legal systems,
Yeah,
right?
because
Yes,
again, they
good
have a
distinction.
protocol.
Good
They have
distinction.
protocol, so it's not
Right.
like it's the people who are not following
Yeah.
the protocols or or interpreting the laws in certain kind. Because the law is the law.
Right.
And lawyers and attorneys will tell you that that's the law. How we interpret it matters. And what I'm saying is that when it comes to proper investigations, there's a way to do it, and investigators are trained to do it. They go to classes for this. They know how to how to create a profile
Yeah.
of someone who does a murder. But when it comes to the young black people under these certain kinds of mysterious circumstances, if you
Right.
will,
We see even
there's
higher rates of it not working the way
right,
it's
right,
supposed to.
right.
Yeah.
So then, we need people to do case studies of investigative protocol investigations.
Mm,
So then, maybe one way you change the protocol is by studying a set of cases and saying, well, the protocol worked well here because
right.
the context, the actors were here. But what happened in Atlanta might not work well in um, Greenville, Mississippi, because of
Right.
resources. So I think that's something to consider. But everyone has a protocol for it. I mean, investigators know how to investigate.
Yeah. And so you mentioned actually earlier, earlier we were talking about the blame, and you mentioned something just now about the way that black people are assumed to be a certain way. And I kind of want to return to the body cams because I think that the online forums that those are getting posted on are creating really an echo chamber for that kind of thing, those kinds of assumptions, those kinds of broad mass characterizations. And I'm how do you feel is the best way to handle that? Do you think it is through more restrictive guidelines on social media? Do you think it's through different ways of doing social media, or do you think it's just that we need to make body cams less available online,
I
or
mean, I'm
rather
not
those
here
types of
to.
videos?
I mean, I'm not here to police people's
Yeah, I didn't think
social
you that would
media.
be.
Yeah, I'm not here to like
Yeah,
police what people watch social media, what people how they use social media. What I am saying is that this is a big topic. So it's happening a lot because it's like, how do we like, because social media is like this unrestricted place of access to so many
yeah,
different things.
and there's so much
It's
anonymity.
Yeah, but I do think that the body cams are needed for investigations. The issue is
Yeah,
that
no,
no, but the issue is that we've seen investigations where body cam footage was there and people still get off.
right, yeah,
So there's a whole other side of this where it's like, even when we know what happened actually on camera, people are still getting away with it. So I said all that to say that I don't think we need more restrictive use of social media, but I do think that once we know it's honestly it is a feeling for each person's different. Like true crime people might like that kind of stuff. There's a whole genre of people who are like really
Mhm.
into that kind of stuff, and nothing's wrong with that. What I am saying is that I know
Right.
for me personally, I can't watch those things anymore because I remember
Yeah.
early on when we were watching it and to hear black people screaming to as a way to sound the alarm and still being killed is something I just can't get into anymore. So I
Right.
don't go to those corners of social media, if you would. And if I do see it,
Yeah.
I immediately move out of it. But I do think there's a place for it. But I don't think police and social media is going to get rid of it because if they do that, they'll go to some other blog or some other website or
I
platform.
agree. Yeah, and I think there's something to be said though for the idea that, you know, I agree with them needing to be available to the public and that information and that accountability to be something that we have as citizens. But when I see all these things being released on social media in such a constant stream and creating a cesspool for these very polar, very extreme, very just blatantly racist discussions in a lot of cases. I start to wonder, how do you feel about the idea of uh, people are making money from posting these body cam videos? And I think that that's something that is interesting. Is not everyone is posting it as a news, uh, as a reporter. So, what do you think about the idea that it is maybe this is kind of a question for me personally, that it's maybe not okay for people to be able to monetize that black trauma, to use those body cam videos for their own purposes of
I
making money.
mean, I mean, they've been monetizing black trauma since lynchings. They've sent postcards out with lynchings. So the whole idea of like them
Something
monetizing from Black Death is, I mean, Black Death is lucrative, sadly. And I say that boldly because you're right. People are posting it for that very purpose, for clicks. But also, but we can't read this without reading it against the history of social media.
right,
Like 20, what, maybe 19, 18 years ago, Twitter wasn't like the way it is now. First off, we saw things in real time. Like now you go on social media, things don't populate in real time anymore. Your algorithm decides what you see and when you see it. So you can post today and your friends might not see it for the 2 days. And not because you don't follow your friends, it's because your algorithm doesn't show you that.
right,
Back a long time ago, if you posted at 8 o'clock a.m., that was immediately on everybody's feed at 8 a.m. There was no waiting for it to show up on the news feed or on your Explorer page. So now that we changed the algorithms of all this is happening, now we're seeing different things based on what we've been clicking or not clicking or what the algorithm wants us to see at that very much time, given what's being in the news as well. So I'm saying
right.
all that to say that I think that people have always monetized off of death, Black Death, or all kinds of that in general. So for me, I'm I don't I'm not concerned per se about them
That
monetizing it
particularly,
because they're going to do it whether they do it social media wise or they do it in private. There are a number of mechanisms to ensure that continues on. I think for me, my biggest thing, among other things that we talked about with this, has really been about the lack of due diligence in trying to figure out why young
what's
black
going
people are
on?
being killed and
Yeah,
how they are being killed. And I'm glad I'm glad, Fair Observer is really, casting a light on this. Because it's something that needs to be talked about a number of times, but we also have to think about this with some type of critical eye and with context. And that's why when you said investigations, that's my biggest thing. And I'm watching all this unfold, and the investigations are not being conducted. And I mean, even with what's going on with Nolan Wells right now, is that there's so much happening right now, and we don't. This has been the most public um um most public. I'm missing the word, but this has been the most improper investigation I've ever seen in a very long time. There is too many actors, too much going on here
Yes, there
for
is a
us not to know what's going. Why do we not know what happened to Nolan Wells? Like what?
yeah, there is so much attention on the case. It is wild. And I mean,
Yes, wild, wild.
sorry, did I cut you off?
No, you're right. It's wild. It is. I'm just like, what is going on?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, and another part of the chaos, I think, is allowing some of the focus to be taken off of just the fact that this young boy was killed and is no longer going to experience the rest of his life. And I did want to talk to you about that, about how media can be a little bit more responsible with how they talk
Mhm.
about these things to really humanize and keep, especially with kids, keep them painted as kids and keep the focus on them being victims and steer the conversation away from,
Mhm.
trying to blame in a way that wouldn't happen for a white person.
Well, and I would say that we need media that is socially responsible. That's the kind of media we're looking at. Is that media can do a number of things, and we've seen with the rise of different forms of media, the rise of anybody having a podcast, all this kind of stuff happening, and the ability to say things without evidence.
Yeah,
Or to speak of something as an expert. I made it very clear at the beginning of our conversation that I'm not an expert in
yeah,
studying this this phenomenon that we're talking about. But as a professor of African American studies, sociologist, and a black man, I know I have some different dimensions to talk about this conversation
yeah,
in. What I will say is that media that wants to be socially responsible, people should know what happens to people. If and I mean this case here is yet again shining a light on how investigations are so messy and how investigations are so complex and complicated because there are too many. It's the fact that his body, the fact that it was found the way it was found, and that nobody out there seems to know what happened to him. All those people, and nobody knows what happened to him.
yeah. And there's a lot of different kind of stories as well, right?
Conflicted, yeah, and conflicting stories are right because in an investigation, the
Yeah,
investigator's
there's
job is to
piece them
understand,
together,
piece
right?
them together.
Yeah,
So get proper investigation. So
yeah,
it's like begin to piece them together, but nobody is necessarily doing this work. I will say this now. One person that is Nancy Grace. I'm not familiar with who Nancy Grace is, but
not
TV personality, but she has a show called Crime Stories, and she takes up cases. Now, I said to say is that Nancy Grace has really been trying to figure out what happened to Nolan Wells, and I bring this up about her because this is the kind of stuff that we just want to know what happened. That's all,
yeah.
and
Answers.
and this is so big, and this is so. I mean, he's on this island with all these people, but this could be anything. You have people. You're on a college campus full of all these people,
Yeah,
and you're at a party, and then you're dead, and nobody at the party knows why you're dead.
yeah. What happened? Yeah,
And these, thank you. And there it is, right there, Lucy. What happened? What happened to figuring out
yeah,
what happened?
yeah,
Like, what happened to
yeah,
actually asking the question, what happened?
yeah. And I think it's just painful to think about the parents and family specifically. And you talked a little bit about earlier about how their process of grief is so interrupted
Hmm.
by this. And
It's they're not even able to go through the full process of grief because
right,
they don't even know what happened
yeah,
because the
right. How
world
can
will
you get to
say
acceptance?
right because the world is saying or the investigate or what's being said in the media is that your daughter was a drunk and that so since she was a drunk of course she's going to fall over the
Right.
balcony and die and you're
Yeah.
like wait no my daughter is not a drunk I know my
Yeah.
daughter and she had too much to drink at a party where were her friends at
Right.
the one and we always ask who'd you go with who who who
Yeah.
was with you?
Yeah.
But why are the investigators not asking these questions? So
Yeah.
so that's why we have the rise of social media investigators.
Yes, and then that
It's
is just a cluster.
correct. It's a that's what I'm saying is that they're putting pieces together better than investigators.
Yeah, yes, yeah, yeah. No, the social media sleuths have gotten crazy. You don't want to mess with those
No,
guys.
you don't, because they have receipts. They have. That's what I'm saying. Is like because so much of our world is on social media now. Like these Netflix documentaries now. They're using people's social media stories to tell the
Yeah,
stories of how they got.
you're
So
right.
so how come? And these are young people. So most people are on TikTok. We're posting stories. We're on Instagram, Facebook, going live, and now all of a sudden, none of that's available. How does that work?
Yeah. Yeah, and you made a really good point too about how it's also just painful for the assumptions to be made so quickly. Like, you
Yes.
know, for you jump to your daughter's a drunk or your son committed suicide, it's like, oh, hang on, like maybe there was some mental health stuff I wasn't aware of, but for you to
Right.
go there and decide that that's
Yes.
it, right? Like
And
immediately,
then
I'm going to
then
be on the defensive.
and then go to the media and say this
Yes,
because they publish these findings.
right.
So then now it's a public document, and now people can access it. And I think that's one of the biggest things about these cases. And before this conversation, I didn't think about it, but I think my main, as a professor, my main takeaway, if you will,
Yeah,
is that we need to call into question how investigations are done.
yeah,
And maybe uniformity, as you said for Lucy, is one of the options. Maybe it's a matter of people need more resources, because I do know a lot of investigators are inundated with so many different murders and problems and issues that they don't have the resources. So maybe
yeah.
it's about investing in strengthening protocols for investigation.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. We and
Mhm.
a lot of times when we talk about funding of policing and whatnot, we talk about people who are on the street and whatnot, but we don't really talk about the investigative work behind the scenes and all the administrative stuff and everything.
And, and,
Um,
and it takes a lot. And again, this is not like this is something where it's like everyone should know, if your loved one dies in this horrific way, there should be justice.
yeah.
And I think that's really where we're at, is that people just want justice.
Yeah.
Black folks have been wanting justice since the period of enslavement in the United States. And justice is what the law is supposed to provide for people. But it appears that justice in the context of Black life is not something people are concerned about. So now we now have these movements that are calling into question our system because it hasn't worked well. The problem with the system conversation is that we have to also call out system actors. Who are the people
Yeah.
doing this? Who are these investigators who are rushing to say suicide after two
Right.
hours of conversations? Who?
Yeah.
And that's and the kind of work that I've done in my broader work is about power dynamics. And investigations have so much power, webs of power associated with it, because so many people are a part of the investigative process, but that's their job.
Yeah.
That's You're an investigator, so we need you to investigate the way you were trained to investigate, and not be concerned about who you are investigating. Your job is to find out what happened. Full stop.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I'll take that and circle back to your kind of concluding thoughts to finish up. Um, I think that's a really good call to action is,
Mhm.
focus on pressure on police departments for investigations to happen properly and
Yep.
thoroughly,
Yes.
and pressure on the individual investigators.
Right.
And I think
Right.
that has to look, lawful so that more people don't get in trouble and it doesn't get more chaotic. I know
Right.
I've seen some people recently get arrested for death threats of witnesses in the Nolan
Yep.
Wells case, I
Mhm.
believe.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely, I think that's a great call for a civic action that regular
Right.
people can take.
Right.
And
And,
I also
and,
like,
and and to your point, Luce, I think it's like,
yeah,
I'm sorry to cut you off, but you said
no, no,
something
go
earlier
ahead.
about chaos. And I think there's so much chaos around these investigations that we got to get back to the heart of why you're doing what you're doing. And I think, again, having so much available online now is clouding the ability to do this kind of work,
Right.
because you have to consider all these conflicting voices. So maybe the goal is
Yeah.
to, because there's so much chaos around this, but
Yes.
your job is to figure out what actually happened
Mm-hmm.
and to bring that news home to those families. I'm glad we centered the families and their grief, because that's not a conversation being had at the national level. It's about who Nolan Wells was and how his friends didn't do it.
Right.
Has nothing to do with the families that deserve to know what happened to their boy, which is why
Yeah.
that's why Mamie Till Mobley said, I want to show them what happened to my boy.
Yeah.
Because people deserve to know that this is
Yes.
the America that we live in.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that there's nothing more visceral than the loss of a family member, specifically child.
Yes.
And I agree. We really should be centering that.
Hmm.
And I think that to finish out, you made that point about what the families and what people deserve, and what the news can do. And I think I'll take that directive upon myself, as well
Yeah.
as, I hope that other journalists will, to offer clarity, answers, and extreme thoroughness in this kind of thing.
Thank you.
So I was wondering, do you have any concluding thoughts, or things that you want to leave the audience with on this topic?
I would say that I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I said earlier that I was excited about the conversation, not about the contents of the conversation,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
but excited that there are platforms that allow for us to have these kind of conversations publicly, but also that our resolve really is about really thinking about how investigations are being conducted.
Yeah,
And I don't think that's been a part. They talked about the investigations, but not the mechanics of
right.
it.
Not about how
Uh,
done.
how it
Yeah,
should be done, and I think that's what we need to start asking people is we need to see protocols for investigation.
right.
So that I can know. So maybe a call to action is also for advocates and activists who are doing this kind of work.
Yeah,
Let's start reading those investigation protocols so
yeah,
that we can know where they are.
yeah.
And
That
that's
is really
and that
interesting.
and that should be public knowledge. That should be
Yeah,
publicly available somewhere. Hmm.
yeah. Those are some wonderful, like, small action items that people
Hmm.
can actually do. And I think that's great, because sometimes not knowing what to do leads people to just doing nothing. So
True. That's
thank
what we're
you
seeing.
so much for being here today,
Thank you.
and giving all this insight. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. I appreciate it.
Bye. It was
Bye
really
bye.
great to talk to you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.